It's Law Talk with BJ, the podcast where trial attorney and legal commentator BJ Bernstein and her guests discuss the latest issues from around the legal world. BJ is a frequent commentator on television and radio. She's unique in that she not only comments on legal issues, having been lead counsel on numerous high-profile cases of national interest, but her relatable personal style allows the viewer to understand the law behind the headlines and why it's important. Now, here's your host, BJ Bernstein.
Welcome to Law Talk with BJ. Today, our guest is Michelle LeClair. It's going to be a little different law talk than some other ones, and you may even say to me, BJ, how does this connect to law? But I assure you, listen to this whole story, and then I think you're going to want to buy her book, because Michelle has a book that has just been released on her journey from being a Scientologist at 18 and her leaving the church for the love of her life. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, BJ. I'm happy to be here.
So let's go back to Michelle, 18 years old, because that's where the book begins. And tell us, how did you become part of Scientology?
So my mother and I moved from Oklahoma when I was 16. And my mom got recruited by a management company to consult called Sterling Management. And Sterling Management happened to be one of the largest recruiters to the church Scientology. And she had absolutely no idea. We didn't know who L. Ron Hubbard was. We didn't know who Scientology was.
It just was a good job for her.
Yeah, I mean, she was so happy to get this consulting job. And so I started working there during the summer, filing and helping out. And, my mom started getting further and further involved in courses, how to better your business, how to be a better salesperson.
And were those courses through Sterling Management, or did it already then appear that this was L. Ron Hubbard's teachings at that point?
So they were through Sterling, and Sterling made it clear that these were L. Ron Hubbard teachings, but that they were secular. And they told her that it had nothing to do with the church. And she said, okay, well, I don't know what church you're talking about. I'm not interested in religion, but okay, I'm happy to, take some course. And my stepfather at the time told her, Terry, this is a cult. And she's like, this isn't a cult. This is a big working company.
And it seemed like to her at that point, because she brought you in to come work at this company at 18.
Well, so I was working there during the summer.
Okay.
And then I had been accepted to the American University of Paris. I'd been accepted to many universities, but that was one that I had chosen. I wanted to go into international law. And I had always kind of seen my law career ahead of me. So the summer before I was supposed to leave, my mom said, well, why don't you come and work here? And I think one thing I realized with this book is when I look back now, I knew I had no way to get to Paris. My mother wasn't really helping me. She didn't have the money to do it. My father didn't know anything about it. I mean, what was I going to do? Jump on an airplane and show up in Paris and say I'm here? I think it was my own fear that allowed me to say, when they offered me a higher position, okay, I'll work here for another year.
And that set the course of more and more involvement and taking more courses for yourself as well, not just your mom.
I did. I jumped in. I have always been a sponge with anything that I could learn. And so I decided that if there were courses available, I was going to do them all. And so I would go on the weekends and I would stay, after work, and I would do these courses. But really the turning point for me was I got into a major car accident on on my way to work. And it was a very spiritual moment for me. And I should have died. I went underneath 2 semi-trucks, and the only place that there was not, a wheel mark was right where I was sitting. And I had this overwhelming feeling of protection and warmth, and I knew I was going to make it. And so while I was at the hospital, my mom walked in the hospital room with the Scientology minister. And that was really my full, jumping in.
So it makes sense. I mean, you're young, you go through a life altering or you see your life run in front of you when something like that happens at a young age. And then here is someone offering you an explanation and a hope for the future based on some teachings, religious, or that felt to you like religious, spiritual teachings that resonated at the time.
Right.
So as you're going through, at what point, because you stay involved, do you realize that, or how long do you stay where you say, this is really working for me? I feel I'm really involved, or did early on a tiny voice go off and saying, I'm not sure about this, but my mother's involved and the people I work with are involved and I'm doing well at work. How did that go for you?
Sadly, I don't think a voice went off soon enough. I think when you're young and naive and you know nothing about, especially the way that cults work, they cater to that ego side that is usually pretty big when you're young. You want acceptance, you want to be important, and that's what they cater to. And so I loved it. I loved the attention. And I was all in, took as many courses as I could, went into as much auditing as I could.
Auditing, let's explain what auditing is.
So auditing is when you sit across from somebody and there is what's called an e-meter. It's a electrical meter that is attached to what almost looks like soup cans. And it supposedly registers thought. So Scientology's belief is that, under the conscious and the subconscious, there is pain and regret and things that you don't consciously know. And this meter, with the right questions directed at you, will pick that up. Here's the problem with auditing. Number one, in my opinion, it's hypnotism. You have a little bit of an electrical charge going through your body for hours. And so everything that I've read from very well-known psychiatrists say that it creates an opiate-like state. So all of a sudden you start feeling amazing. And if you want to talk about things that are bothering you, that auditor, that person that's supposedly listening to you, redirects you to where they want you to go. You actually don't get to talk about the things that are truly bothering you. And so
it's a guide. So although it seems like it's guided in a certain way. I mean, when you're sitting there, I'm assuming you feel like you're just really pouring everything out and being connected, and yet there's a guiding in the conversation.
There is. Like they'll ask you, give me a present time problem. And so you mention something and they'll go, no, that didn't read. Give me another present time problem. And you'll bring up something, right? It may not be really what you want to go into. And they'll dive really deep into that. The problem with auditing is this. They direct you to things that are painful. And then once they direct you to the things that are painful, they then direct you to find out how you're responsible for them. So if a woman is raped, they're going to get you to the point where you say, I made that happen. I'm responsible for that. And if there is a child that's molested, what did they do to pull that in? And it becomes, this brainwashing that anything bad that happens to you in your life, that you caused it. And they take you so far down that you feel so horrible that then they lift you back up and you feel that, okay, now that I took responsibility for that, and you put no blame on the perpetrator, then they make you believe that that is empowering. And there could be many different decisions on this, right?
And I'm going to pause you for 1 second, because as you are saying this, whether you realize it or not, I'm looking at your eyes, and we're on a podcast, and they're welling up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that anybody has to go through things. Everybody in childhood or when they're young and they're vulnerable go through things. But I'm sitting here watching you, how you still have a reaction to that long ago being audited.
I think what it is it saddens me more than any sort of anger, right? Okay. As a woman who went through very painful things, I wasn't allowed to get away from them. I was only allowed to say that I was responsible for them when I was not. And so living this beautiful life that I live now, I feel this sense of responsibility of making sure that this cult is exposed, because the practices that they do are the exact opposite of what you should be doing to better somebody or to give them back their power or to make them feel better about themselves. You're trapped. You're totally trapped in a certain way of thinking.
So I'm going to move you on as you get older, because you're working here, and then your career starts to change, and you're involved in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And I want to compare that trajectory to your mother's that you talk about in the book, where your mother is part of what's called the Sea Org. So can you kind of lay out the different paths that you were on within the framework of Scientology?
Sure. I think we all find a way of coping. So my way of coping through the pain that I was going through was to work hard. And luckily, I'd always had it in me that I wanted to be the best at anything that I did. So I fell into the insurance world at, a very young age. I loved it because I was helping people. I started out working with teachers and nurses to help create a retirement program. And I was great at it. And so after many years of education in that industry, I ended up starting my own company in 2006.
So you worked for some other agencies and learned the ropes and then opened your own.
I did. And, then I eventually built one of the largest women-owned insurance agencies in the nation. Simultaneous, my mom was, on her path. And my mother felt that Scientology was her path. And so she wanted to become the best that she could. So she ended up giving her life to the Church of Scientology. She ended up signing a 1 billion-year contract.
Be with 1 billion years.
Yes.
Because we're here for 1 billion years.
They believe that we are here many lifetimes. And, and that if you commit yourself as a being, you will always find your way back. And so she signed this contract, and she ended up working her way up and eventually became one of the top, people in the marketing department from the Church of Scientology in their international division. I was very proud of her. She was proud of me. I was proud of her. And neither one of us told each other the pain that we were going through, because you just didn't do that as Scientologists.
And it appeared from all outward circumstances. And for you, you were having a good career and financially successful and owning your own business. Those are all things that to an outsider would say, oh, you are independent. You are strong. I am woman. Hear me roar. Get Helen Reddy going. And that sounds like you appeared to be at that point.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, Helen Reddy's song, I Am Woman, is like my all-time favorite.
I did not know that. Okay.
My mom and I used to listen to that all the time. But yeah, I mean, the church is all about PR. So they believe that you have to be the best, outward picture that you can. You have to look good. You have to have a successful career. You got to make a lot of money, and you got to show a successful marriage. And that's the perfect picture so that you can say, I'm a Scientologist. Do I look brainwashed? No. The problem is that you are in a box, and every single thing you do is dictated to you by the works of L. Ron Hubbard. How to raise a child, how to have a marriage, how to run a business, how to communicate to somebody. You are taught everything. And so what you don't realize is that your box is extremely small compared to the rest of the world.
And that ties in next to your choice of a marriage partner.
Right.
Can you share a little bit about that?
So I tried to come out gay at 19. I didn't know what gay was. I mean, all I knew is that I was attracted to women. I kind of thought all women were attracted to women, that if you were really close with your girlfriends, those are the people you were attracted to. I quickly found out that the church did not think that. And I had to go through a series of steps and making up damage for having any sort of relationship with a woman. And I had to make a choice to live in the heterosexual world. And I think, there was a little part of me that kind of died and had to kind of get covered up because I was scared to death at the thought of being with a man. And that was correct from my experience. So,
but you were encouraged?
I was encouraged. I ended up getting married at 21. I ended up getting married to a man who became very abusive over time and started using the fact that he knew I was gay against me. And there were many years of things starting out with verbal arguments and things thrown at me and water and boiling water or ice cold water. And then it got worse, and it was a horrible experience. And then I would reach out to the church for help. I tried to divorce 5 times and they weren't having it. I had now worked myself up to running one of their top human rights organizations, which is really just a front group to the church. And they were not going to have me divorcing.
Can you divorce in Scientology?
You can, but you have to have the International Justice Chief's approval to go through a divorce. And I have seen divorces in the church, but they are kind of far and few between.
So very different from the regular journey that someone would go through when you get to that point in your marriage and you call a lawyer and a therapist and sit down and talk about leaving or changing. It's a much larger decision.
Yeah. I mean, you're going through marriage counseling, you're meeting with the chaplain of the church, and if you do decide to divorce, you're hiring a Scientology attorney. They don't want anything in the public eye. And so they don't want divorces going back and forth and that somebody can look up something in a public record and see that 2 Scientologists are fighting it out. Everything has to go through the church.
And then just the minimal state paperwork is ultimately filed later on.
That's right.
Instead of having all the depositions and the court documents and the interrogatories and the questions and the requests for documents and the things that give pitter-patter to the lawyers everywhere, that's not part of how you get divorced.
No, and I think that really begs a legal question, right? Just because you're involved in a certain religion that has a standard, is it legal that you can be denied certain rights that you have as a United States citizen?
It is interesting, although, different religions have different things. I know, obviously, I'm Jewish, and technically you need, I think it's called a get. Somebody's going to correct me if I have this wrong, to be able to divorce. That there is something with regard to the religious part of it, that there is something of it. But there's certainly not a requirement that you have to have a Jewish lawyer.